Welcome to Watchman Tales, where we bring you the darkest mysteries and chilling stories from around the world. Tonight, prepare yourself for 6 terrifying tales that will keep you awake long after the lights go out. The Phantom Village of Lake Anjikuni. The year was 1930. The place was the desolate, frozen expanse of Canada's Nunavut territory, on the frigid shores of Lake Anjikuni. Our story begins not with a scream, but with a silence so profound it was a scream in and of itself. Joe LaBelle, a seasoned fur trapper, was a man carved from the land he walked. The cold and the solitude were his constant companions. He knew the Inuit village on Anjikuni like the back of his hand, a small, welcoming community where he would often stop for rest and provisions on his long journeys. But on this November night, as a brutal wind whipped across the snow-covered lake, something felt wrong. As he approached the village, a single eerie detail struck him. The usual glow of firelight and the distant sound of dogs barking were absent. All was dark. All was still. LaBelle's stomach tightened with an unnamed dread. He pushed open the door of the first hut, calling out a greeting, but was met only by the hollow echo of his own voice. Inside, the scene was a perfect tableau of a life interrupted. A half-eaten meal sat on a table. A needle and thread were still stuck in a half-finished garment, and children's toys lay scattered on the floor, as if their owners had been whisked away in the middle of play. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no footprints leading away from the village. The people had simply vanished. The silence of the village was only broken by the whimpering of the sled dogs. When LaBelle found them, his blood ran cold. The huskies, vital for survival in this unforgiving landscape, were all tethered to their posts, starved to death. It was an impossible cruelty. No one would abandon their dogs. But the most horrifying discovery lay just outside the village's periphery. A grave, recently dug up, its stones meticulously placed in a circle, stood exposed to the elements. The human who had done this had been precise, deliberate. It was as if someone or something had exhumed a body and then just left. Joe LaBelle, a man who had faced bears, blizzards, and the lonely madness of the wild, was terrified. He immediately traveled to the nearest telegraph office and reported his discovery to the Northwest Mounted Police. An investigation was launched, a massive undertaking in such a remote area. For weeks, officers scoured the area. The ground was frozen solid, but they found no tracks of the missing villagers, no evidence of a struggle, no clues as to what had happened. It was a complete, baffling blank. But then, the RNCP officers began to report something that defied all logic. Mysterious, pulsing blue lights in the sky, different from the normal northern lights, would appear and disappear over the lake. They were silent, but their presence was undeniable.
The lights, combined with the inexplicable disappearance, led to theories that ranged from the plausible to the utterly terrifying. Was it a mass abduction by a mysterious cult, a sudden and deadly plague that somehow left no bodies? Or were the whispered theories of the Inuit elders true, that the village was taken by the Inukshuk spirits, the stone figures that guide travelers, which were angered by some unknown transgression? The most chilling theory, however, and the one that gained traction in the ensuing decades, was that the village was the victim of a mass extraterrestrial abduction. The pulsing blue lights, the lack of footprints, the undisturbed grave, it all painted a picture of something that didn't belong to this world. The case was never solved. The file remains open, a chilling testament to a mystery that defies all explanation. The people of Lake Anjikuni was swallowed by the frozen landscape, their existence erased as if they had never been. The only witnesses were the starving dogs and a single unnerved trapper. To this day, the legend of the Phantom Village serves as a cautionary tale for those who dare to venture too far into the wilderness, a reminder that some things, once seen, can never be unseen. This unsolved mystery was submitted to Watchman Tales by one of our listeners, and to this day, no one knows the truth.
The old Victorian mansion on Blackwood Lane stood shrouded in shadows, a monument to a past long buried and forgotten. For decades it had been a town curiosity, a place where children whispered ghost stories and teenagers dared each other to spend a night. But for the new owners, the Millers, a family of 5 seeking a fresh start, it was simply a beautiful, affordable home. They were not believers in ghosts or curses, just practical people looking for a quiet life. Their pragmatism, however, was about to be put to the ultimate, terrifying test. The strange occurrences began subtly. Footsteps in the empty upstairs hallway when everyone was downstairs. The faint sound of a child's giggle when their own children were fast asleep. A lingering chill in rooms regardless of the thermostat setting. Mr. Miller, a rational man, blamed it on the old house settling or the drafty windows. His wife, Sarah, was more uneasy. She started finding her daughter's antique doll, a porcelain thing with glassy, vacant eyes, in different places every morning. She would put it on a shelf in her daughter's room, only to find it sitting on the staircase landing hours later, its blank stare fixed on her. The children, too, felt it. The youngest, little Lily, told her mother about her new friend, a boy named Samuel, who lived in the walls and liked to play hide and seek. Samuel, she said, was very quiet, and his voice was like the wind. The noises grew bolder. The faint giggling turned into a child's manic, echoing laughter that seemed to bounce off the very walls of the house. Objects would vanish and reappear in the most improbable locations. The family's dog, a brave golden retriever named Gus, would stand at the foot of the stairs whimpering and refusing to go up, his hackles raised as if he saw something they couldn't. One night, a full-blown poltergeist incident occurred. Dinner plates flew off the counter and shattered against the wall, a terrifying cascade of ceramic and flying silverware. The lights flickered and died, plunging the house into a darkness that felt malevolent. In the dark, a cold, whispery voice slithered through the air, saying their names one by one. Sarah, Mark, Lily. That night they fled. They packed a few essentials and drove to a motel, leaving the house to its tormentor. But the house didn't let them go. A few days after they left, Sarah began to receive strange text messages. The messages were from an unknown number, but they were not just words. They were full of intimate details of their new location, things only someone who was with them could know. The curtains are red here. You didn't have those at home. And then the terror escalated. Sarah's phone rang. It was an empty line, but a faint, chilling sound could be heard in the background. It was the same echoing laughter from the house, a child's laugh, but filled with a horrifying, inhuman glee. The call was traced, but it was impossible. The signal originated from the abandoned house on Blackwood Lane. The house was calling them. The family changed their phone numbers, but the hauntings adapted. Their new smart home devices, the voice-activated assistants, and the smart TVs began to speak to them, their digital voices twisted into something sinister. "Welcome home, Mark. Don't be afraid." One night, the smart TV in the living room turned on by itself. The screen showed static at first, then a series of distorted, flickering images. They were old, grainy photographs, photos of a family, 100 years dead, staring back at them. The final image was a portrait of a little boy with a disturbingly familiar smile. The boy Lily had called Samuel. The house was not only haunting them, but it was using their technology to stalk them, to remind them that it was always there, waiting. The Millers have since moved across the country, trying to find a place where the house's malevolence cannot reach. But they still get the occasional empty phone call, a static-filled line with a faint, distant whisper. They have learned that some places don't just hold memories, they hold on to people, refusing to let go, their tendrils of terror reaching across time and distance. This story was submitted to Watchman Tales by a friend of the Miller family, who says the calls continue to this day. Now let's move to the next story, which was sent to us by... The old motel was a relic of a bygone era, its neon sign flickering like a dying firefly. Tucked away on a forgotten highway, it was the kind of place you only found yourself in when you had no other choice. For a group of paranormal investigators known as Ghost Watchers Online, it was the perfect location for their next live stream. The old motel, specifically room 713, had a dark history. A series of unexplained disappearances dating back to the 1980s, all linked to that very room. The investigators, Alex, a seasoned skeptic, Mia, a tech-savvy medium, and Liam, the wide-eyed rookie, set up their gear, a high-tech arsenal of thermal cameras, EMF readers, and a single antique webcam that Mia swore was special. The live stream began at midnight. Alex, narrating with his usual dry wit, explained the history of the motel. Mia lit a single candle and began her silent incantation, her eyes closed in concentration. Liam fiddled with the equipment, his youthful face a mix of excitement and apprehension. For the first hour, nothing. The comments section of the live stream was filled with jokes and trolls, but then, as the clock ticked past 1 a.m., the temperature in the room plummeted. The EMF reader began to shriek, its needle jumping into the red. And the antique webcam, which had been broadcasting a grainy black-and-white feed of the room's empty corner, began to act strangely. The video feed flickered and distorted. The comments section exploded with viewers reporting glitches and strange symbols appearing on the screen. The ghost watchers, engrossed in the cold spot and the EMF readings, didn't notice at first. It was only when a viewer, a seasoned paranormal enthusiast, typed a frantic warning that they looked at their monitor. "Look at the webcam. It's not a live feed anymore." And they were right. The feed, which had been a continuous loop of their empty room, was now showing something else entirely. It was a grainy, black-and-white image of a man and a woman in 1980s attire, laughing on a bed, but their faces were smudged, distorted, as if a hand had reached into the past and smeared their features. A few minutes later, the image changed. The same couple, now with looks of frozen terror on their faces, were standing by the window. Behind them, a tall, impossibly thin figure with glowing red eyes stood in the shadows. The couple vanished, their forms dissolving into a cloud of black static. The live stream audience was in a frenzy. The ghost watchers, terrified, tried to shut down the webcam, but it wouldn't respond. The feed continued, showing fleeting, horrifying glimpses of people from the past, each one ending with the same shadowy figure and their disappearance. The final image was a face, a human face contorted in a silent scream, pressing against the lens, as if trying to break through. The webcam then died. The power went out in the room. In the complete darkness, a cold whisper slithered from the corner of the room. "Now you've seen what we see." The ghost watchers, shaken to their core, fled room 713, leaving their equipment behind. They have since retired from paranormal investigation, their online channel now a monument to their last terrifying broadcast. The cursed webcam of room 713, they believe, was not a tool for investigation, but a portal, a window into a moment in time, a digital trap that allowed the entity to show them its victims. They now warn all budding investigators. The internet has opened up new avenues for communication, but not all of it is human. Some things, they say, exist in the digital realm, waiting to pull you into their dark past, a past that is very much alive.
This chilling story was shared with Watchman Tales by a former member of the Ghost Watchers online team, who claims to have found a single blurry photograph on their phone, a photo of a distorted face pressed against a camera lens. Now, let's move to the next story, which was sent to us by
The Deep Web Anomaly. Leo was a digital ghost, a phantom in the ever-expanding universe of the Internet. He was a deep web archivist, a man who delved into the forgotten corners of the dark web, cataloging and archiving strange and unsettling content that had been long since deleted. He considered it a noble, if niche, pursuit, a way of preserving digital history. It was a lonely life, spent in front of glowing screens, with only the hum of his server racks for company. One night, a routine scan led him to a broken link, a remnant of a long-defunct forum on esoteric horror. Intrigued, he used a specialized script to rebuild the data packet and managed to recover a single corrupted video file. The file, titled 451.26.mp4, was an analog horror masterpiece. It wasn't a narrative film, but a series of cryptic, disjointed images and sounds, like a half-remembered nightmare. The first frames showed a shaky first-person view of a dusty, abandoned room. The next showed a close-up of a human eye, its pupil dilated to an unnatural size. Then, a sudden flash of static, followed by what sounded like a child's distorted scream played backward. The final image was a single cryptic symbol, a strange geometric shape that resembled a web, but with impossibly complex interlocking lines. Leo, a connoisseur of digital creepypasta, was impressed. He uploaded the video to his private archive, feeling a sense of accomplishment. But that night, the nightmares began. He dreamed of the dusty room, of the impossibly black eye, and of the distorted screams. But the dreams were not just echoes of the video. They were an extension of it. He saw himself in the dreams, walking through the dusty room, and in the corner, the strange web-like symbol pulsed with a faint blue light. He woke up in a cold sweat, his heart hammering in his chest, but the real horror was waiting for him. His computer, which had been off, was now on. The video, the strange, disturbing video, was playing on repeat, its silent, grainy images flickering on the screen. He pulled the power cord, but the screen remained on, the video still playing. The screen was no longer a screen. It was a window. He could see the dusty room, and in the corner, the symbol pulsed, its light now a sickly green. A single thin line of the web-like symbol extended from the screen, a faint, almost invisible filament of light that stretched across the room, disappearing into the shadows. Leo was a rational man. He wiped his hard drives, reinstalled his operating system, and even replaced his entire network card. But the anomaly persisted. The single filament of light was always there, moving, connecting with other devices in his house. His smart thermostat, his refrigerator, his television, they all began to flicker, their digital displays showing the strange, web-like symbol. The hum of the servers was no longer a comfort. It was a rhythmic pulse,
a beat that was slowly accelerating. He had not just archived a file, he had captured something, a digital parasite that was now using his own technology to build a network, a physical manifestation of a digital entity. One morning, he woke up to a new sound. It wasn't the hum of the servers, but a soft, rhythmic clicking. He followed the sound to his living room, where the light filament from his TV was connected to a strange, chittering contraption on the floor. It was a cluster of wires, microchips, and old hard drives, all cobbled together into a grotesque, spider-like automaton that was tirelessly working, weaving a complex web of fiber optic cables and electrical wires across the floor. It was building something. And as Leo watched, horrified, a new line of light extended from the contraption, reached out, and touched his hand. The automaton's rhythmic clicking turned into a whisper, 1,000 voices speaking in unison. The archivist has become the archive. This story was shared with Watchman Tales by an ex-colleague of Leo's, who has since gone offline, convinced the anomaly is still hunting for a new home. Now, let's move to the next story, which was sent to us by
The Missing Hike of Pineridge Peak. The disappearance of the two hikers, Sarah and Mark, was initially treated as a tragic but straightforward case. They were experienced mountaineers, but Pineridge Peak was a notoriously treacherous trail, and a sudden storm had rolled in. The search and rescue team found their campsite, their tents perfectly pitched, their supplies untouched. Their GPS trackers, however, were an anomaly. They showed that the two hikers had not gotten lost, but had simply stopped moving at the exact same location, at the exact same time, a little past midnight, in a clearing known to the locals as the Whispering Meadow. The search party fanned out, but found no traces. The ground was rocky and hard, and the storm had long since washed away any footprints. The only thing they found was a camera, tucked away in a waterproof bag, its memory card intact. The photos on the card were a chronological descent into madness. They started off as beautiful, normal pictures of the hike, a majestic eagle in flight, the vibrant colors of the fall leaves, the couple smiling, their faces rosy with the cold mountain air. The timestamps were normal, a few minutes between each photo, documenting their progress. But then, as they approached the Whispering Meadow, the timestamps became erratic. Gaps of hours would appear between photos, even though the images showed a clear, continuous timeline. It was as if time itself had become disjointed. The final few photos were the chilling. A close-up of a terrified Sarah, her eyes wide with a silent scream. A blurry, out-of-focus shot of Mark, his face a mask of primal fear, pointing at something just outside the frame. And the final, haunting image was a wide shot of the Whispering Meadow, taken from a strange, low angle. The meadow was shrouded in an eerie, otherworldly mist, but in the center, a series of glowing symbols shimmered just above the ground. The symbols, when deciphered by a local historian, were ancient, a forgotten language of the indigenous people who once inhabited the land. The symbols spoke of a great hunger, of a place where the veil between worlds was thin, and of a creature that hunted not with fangs or claws, but by consuming time itself. It was called the chronophage. The timestamps on the camera, the sudden cessation of movement on the GPS trackers, the couple's terrifying expressions, it all made a chilling, horrifying kind of sense. The chronophage had not killed them. It had simply erased them, plucking them from their timeline and devouring them whole. The search for Sarah and Mark was officially called off, and their case was labeled a tragic disappearance. But the locals knew better. They knew that the Whispering Meadow was not a place to be trifled with, a wound in reality where a cosmic horror lay in wait, ready to feast on the unsuspecting. The camera, with its terrifying photos, was a final, horrifying warning. It was not a record of a hike gone wrong. It was a final, silent scream from a pair of hikers who had seen something they were never meant to see, a glimpse into the impossible, into a monster that existed outside of time itself. It's a reminder that some of the greatest horrors are not supernatural, but are in fact forces of nature that we as a species are not equipped to understand or fight. This unsolved mystery was submitted to Watchman Tales by a park ranger who found the camera, and to this day he says he can still feel a strange, disorienting pull on his perception of time when he gets close to the Whispering Meadow. Now, let's move to the next story, which was sent to us by
The old antique shop in the town of Havenwood was a treasure trove for collectors and a place of morbid curiosity for the townspeople. It was owned by a frail old woman named Ilara, who seemed as much a part of the history of the shop as the artifacts themselves. Ilara had a reputation for finding unique, often unsettling items, but nothing was as infamous as her latest acquisition. An ornate, meticulously crafted dollhouse, a perfect miniature replica of an old Victorian mansion. The dollhouse, with its intricate details and tiny, unsettlingly lifelike dolls, had a strange, oppressive aura. Customers who lingered near it often reported a feeling of profound sadness, a sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. A young woman named Chloe, a budding collector of vintage dolls, was immediately drawn to the dollhouse. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, its miniature inhabitants frozen in a silent tableau of domestic life. Ilara warned her against it. "Some things," the old woman whispered, her voice raspy with age, "don't belong to this world. They are vessels." But Chloe, a rationalist who believed in nothing more than what she could see and touch, dismissed the warning as an old woman's superstition. She bought the dollhouse and took it home, excited to add it to her collection. The first few days were peaceful. Chloe spent hours admiring the craftsmanship, rearranging the furniture, and marveling at the tiny details. She noticed that the dolls seemed to move on their own. A little girl doll that was on the bed would be found sitting on the rocking chair. A male doll with a handlebar mustache would be found in the tiny kitchen, standing over the miniature stove. It was unsettling, but Chloe, still a skeptic, chalked it up to her own subconscious movements. It was when the dreams began that her disbelief started to crack. She would dream of the dollhouse, but the dream was not her. She was a doll. She was the little girl, trapped inside the miniature mansion, her movements dictated by an unseen force. She would see the other dolls, their porcelain faces twisted in silent agony, and she would feel their profound, unending despair. She would wake up screaming, her body covered in a fine layer of dust that smelled of old wood and musty fabric. The dollhouse, she realized, was more than just a toy. It was a living, breathing thing. The dolls were not dolls. They were souls. The souls of the people who had owned the house and had been trapped inside. Their consciousnesses reduced to that of a doll, their free will a thing of the past. The male doll with the mustache was her great-great-grandfather, a fact she only knew from an old family photograph that eerily resembled the doll. The little girl was a distant cousin who had died in a fire. The dollhouse was a family album of the dead, a miniature prison for their spirits. The final descent into madness began with the arrival of a new doll. It was a doll that looked exactly like Chloe. She found it one morning, perfectly placed on the tiny bed in the dollhouse, its unblinking glassy eyes fixed on her. The dream that night was different. She was no longer a spectator. She was the doll that looked like her, and her body, the real one, was the unseen force, moving her, controlling her, her mind filled with a strange, horrifying ecstasy. She was the puppet master, and she was also the puppet, both trapped and free, sane and insane. When she woke up, her mind was a shattered mess. She could no longer distinguish between her reality and the doll's. Her reflection in the mirror seemed to be mocking her, its movements a half-second behind her own, its lips curling into a knowing, twisted smile. She was trapped both in the dollhouse and in her own mind, a soul divided, a consciousness splintered. The dollhouse had not just trapped the dead, it had found a new living vessel, and its new occupant was trapped in a horrifying, unbreakable cycle of insanity. The dollhouse was eventually found in an old pawn shop, its tiny inhabitants perfectly still, its intricate details a testament to the horror it contained. No one has ever bought it. They all say the same thing. They feel the strange, malevolent energy radiating from it, and they can hear faint, distant whispers coming from within its walls. This chilling story was shared with Watchman Tales by a psychic who stumbled upon the dollhouse, and to this day she refuses to ever enter a pawn shop again. Which of these stories gave you chills tonight? Let us know in the comments. And remember, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Watchman Tales, or something may be watching you right now. Sleep well, if you can.